The year is 1942. The world is burning. In the east, the Soviet Union is bleeding, fighting for its very survival against the Nazi war machine. Every tank, every bullet, every ounce of fuel is precious. And a large portion of it is coming from here, the frozen, deadly waters of the Arctic Ocean. This is the Murmansk Run, a gauntlet of ice, perpetual darkness, and German submarines and bombers. For the sailors of the Allied convoys, it is hell frozen over. But they have no choice. Russia must be kept in the fight. On the last day of December, 1942, Convoy JW 51B is making its way east. 14 merchant ships, carrying the tools of war from Britain to the USSR. Their escort is small, modest. The destroyers Onslow, Obedient, Orwell, and Achates. A few smaller corvettes and minesweepers. They are led by Captain Robert Sherbrooke on the Onslow. A capable man, a Royal Navy man through and through. He knows the danger. The sea itself is enemy enough. The temperature is so low that spray freezes instantly on the decks and superstructures, making the ship's top heavy, unstable. The cold is a physical pain. But the sea and the cold are not his only worries. Because in a distant Norwegian fjord, hidden in the deep shadows of Arctic mountains, the wolves are stirring. The Kriegsmarine, Hitler's surface fleet, hungry for a victory. They have been humiliated before. The Bismarck, sunk. The Tirpitz, hiding. They need a triumph to prove their worth to the Führer. And they have been given a juicy target. Convoy JW 51B. The operation has a name, Regenbogen. Rainbow. The force assembled is terrifying, designed for overwhelming destruction. The heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, a floating fortress with 8-inch guns. The so-called pocket battleship Lützow with massive 11-inch rifles. And 6 large, modern destroyers. It is a hunting pack of immense power. Back on the convoy, it is the perpetual twilight of the Arctic winter. A dim, gray gloom that hangs over the sea. Visibility comes and goes with snow squalls. Aboard the Onslow, Captain Sherbrooke is tense. He can feel it. The air is too still. The silence is ominous. His lookouts strain their eyes against the gloom, seeing shadows in every wave. Then, at 8:30 in the morning, a signal arrives from one of the trawlers. Suspicious vessels to the north. Sherbrooke's blood runs colder than the Arctic water. He knows. This is it. He immediately orders the convoy to turn away, to hide in a nearby snow squall. The merchant ships, those slow, vulnerable beasts, begin their clumsy turn. Every second counts. And then, from the bridge of the Onslow, Sherbrooke sees them. Dark shapes materializing out of the gray murk to the northeast. The unmistakable silhouettes of warships. Large ones. It is the Admiral Hipper and her destroyer screen. They are bigger, faster, and their guns outrange his by miles. This is a nightmare scenario. The mathematics of naval warfare are brutal and simple. His destroyers have 4.7-inch guns. The Hipper has 8-inch guns. It is like bringing a knife to a cannon fight. His orders from the Admiralty echo in his mind. The safe and timely arrival of the convoy is the primary objective. Safe and timely. There is nothing in his orders about survival. He looks at the fleeing merchant ships, then back at the approaching German Titans. He makes a decision that defies all logic of self-preservation. He will not run. He will not hide. He will charge. He signals to his tiny force of destroyers, "Follow me. Prepare to lay smoke. We are attacking." The order is met with a moment of stunned silence on the bridge. Then, the signal is acknowledged. These are not just sailors. They are the Royal Navy. They will do their duty. And so, Captain Robert Sherbrooke turns HMS Onslow, this small, frail ship, directly towards the mighty Admiral Hipper. He orders full speed. The engines groan. The bow cuts through the icy water. Behind him, the other destroyers fall in line. They are a line of little giants, facing down a monster. They begin to lay a thick, choking screen of white smoke, trying to blind the German gunners, to hide the convoy. The Hipper opens fire. The first salvo is a ranging shot. The shells scream overhead, monstrous projectiles that sound like tearing metal. They land with colossal plumes of white water, taller than the ships themselves. The sea erupts around the British destroyers. This is it. The Battle of the Barents Sea has begun, and it starts with a suicide charge into the teeth of the enemy. What follows is not a battle in any conventional sense. It is a desperate, chaotic ballet of smoke, ice, and courage played out on a stage of freezing gray water. Captain Sherbrooke's plan is audacious, insane, and the only one he has. He will not stand and fight a gunnery duel. He cannot win that. Instead, he will harass. He will confuse. He will be a mosquito buzzing around the ears of a giant, stinging whenever he sees an opening. His weapon is not his guns, but his torpedoes and the threat they pose. A single torpedo hit could cripple even the mighty Hipper. The Onslow and her sisters, the Obedient and Orwell, weave in and out of their own smoke screen. They are gray ghosts in the gloom. The German gunners on the Hipper are confused, frustrated. They can't get a clear shot. Every time their massive turrets swing towards a target, it disappears into a wall of white smoke, only to reappear moments later from another direction, firing its small guns, launching the deadly promise of torpedoes. Sherbrooke is dancing with a dragon, and he is leading the dance. But the dragon has claws, and they find their mark. A salvo from the Hipper finds the range. A shell screams down and explodes on the Onslow's forward deck. The ship shudders like a living thing in agony. Shrapnel tears across the bridge. Captain Sherbrooke feels a white-hot sledgehammer blow to his face. The world dissolves into a haze of pain and crimson. Shrapnel has torn through his cheek, destroyed his left eye, and sliced his forehead. He is blinded on one side, blood pouring down his face, soaking his uniform. His officers rush to him. They try to lead him below, to the surgeon. He shrugs them off. With sheer, unbelievable willpower, he remains standing on his bridge. He grips the rail, his knuckles white. He can still see with one eye. He can still command. He barks orders, his voice thick but clear. Keep the smoke screen going. Signal to Obedient. Maintain torpedo threat. He is a horrifying, magnificent sight. A man literally holding himself together by force of duty, refusing to let his ship, his convoy, down. While Sherbrooke bleeds on the Onslow, another drama unfolds. The old destroyer HMS Achates, tasked with laying smoke at the rear of the convoy, is spotted by the Hipper's secondary guns. She is smaller, slower. She cannot dance like the others. Shells begin to rain down around her, then on her. A hit cripples her engine room. Steam erupts. Men are scalded, killed. She slows to a crawl, a sitting duck. But her captain, Lieutenant Commander Johns, makes a decision worthy of Sherbrooke. If he cannot move, he will still fight. He will still protect the convoy. He orders his crew to keep laying smoke. Even as more shells hit the Achates, even as fires break out and the icy water pours in through gashes in her hull, her smoke generators keep pumping. She is creating a protective curtain, a shroud for the merchant ships, with her own dying body. The crew fights the fires, tends to the wounded, and mans the one remaining gun. They know they are doomed, but they also know they are not finished. The German commander, Admiral Hipper aboard the Hipper, is growing increasingly furious and anxious. This should have been a quick slaughter. Instead, it's a messy, confusing brawl. These pesky British destroyers will not be brushed aside. They are everywhere. And where are the merchant ships? They are hidden behind a smoke screen that this stubborn, burning destroyer, the Achates, is still reinforcing. He can't see them. He can't sink what he can't see. And the constant, nagging threat of torpedoes from the ghostly destroyers forces him to keep turning to avoid a potential death blow. The sheer, stubborn aggression of the British has thrown his entire plan into disarray. But the Germans have another card to play. The Lützow, the pocket battleship. While the Hipper has been tangling with Sherbrooke's destroyers, the Lützow, with her even bigger guns, has been circling south. Now, she finds what she was looking for. A gap in the smoke. A clear line of sight. And there, right before her massive guns, is the main body of Convoy JW 51B. The merchant ships, exposed and vulnerable. This is the moment. The Lützow's gun turrets, each barrel larger than a man, swing silently towards the helpless ships. All the sacrifice, all the smoke, all the courage of the Achates and the Onslow, it seems it will all be for nothing. The Lützow is about to open fire, and at this range, it will be a massacre. On the bridge of the Lützow, the atmosphere is one of cold, predatory satisfaction. Finally, a clean shot. The cumbersome merchant ships, slow and fat with cargo, are lining up perfectly in their sights. It is a gunner's dream. The order to load the massive 11-inch high-explosive shells is given. The mechanical clatter of the loading rammers echoes deep within the steel hull. In moments, the great guns will roar, and the sea will be littered with sinking wrecks. The entire operation, despite the earlier frustrations with the pesky destroyers, is about to be crowned with devastating success. The men on the Lützow's bridge allow themselves a moment of grim triumph. They can already imagine the reports to headquarters, convoy annihilated. Back with the crumbling British destroyers, the situation is one of pure horror. On the Onslow, a signalman, his own hands bloody from tending to wounded comrades, sees the massive silhouette of the Lützow through a break in the smoke. He shouts a warning, his voice cracking with despair. Captain Sherbrooke, still clinging to consciousness on his ruined bridge, hears it. With his one good eye, he looks. He sees the distance, the angle. He knows, with the certainty of a seasoned sailor, that he cannot get there in time. His ship is too damaged, too far. The Achates is dying. The Orwell and Obedient are still dueling with German destroyers on the flank. There is nothing between the Lützow's guns and the heart of the convoy. A profound and terrible helplessness washes over him, cutting through the pain. It was all for nothing. The charge, the sacrifice, the blood freezing on his face. It was all just a delay of the inevitable. The Arctic cold seems to seep into his very soul. Aboard the merchant ships, panic is a living thing. The sailors, many of them civilians, see the menacing shape of the battleship. They have heard the thunder of the distant guns, seen the flashes on the horizon, the plumes of smoke from the brave little destroyers fighting for them. And now, death has found them. There are no lifeboats that will survive in this water. The temperature will kill a man in minutes. Some pray, some simply stare, paralyzed. Others, with a stubbornness that defines the men of the merchant marine, go below to fetch their precious cargo papers, as if trying to save some shred of their mission. The silence, as they wait for the first salvo, is louder than any explosion. But the Arctic holds secrets, and the fortunes of war can turn on a single, unseen variable. Unbeknownst to the Germans, and a fact even Captain Sherbrooke was not certain of, the convoy had a distant escort. 30 miles away, two British light cruisers, HMS Sheffield and HMS Jamaica, were steaming as a covering force. They had been listening to the frantic, coded radio traffic, the snippets of signals from Onslow, and the distressed calls from the corvettes. They knew a battle was raging, but in the storm and poor visibility, they did not have a clear picture. Their commander, Rear Admiral Robert Burnett, faced a torturous choice. If he charged towards the gunfire, he might be leading his ships into a trap against a superior force he could not see. But if he held back, the convoy would certainly be lost. The weight of hundreds of lives and the fate of a vital war shipment rested on his next order. On the Sheffield's bridge, the reports grew more desperate. Then, a lookout high in the director tower screamed, "Gun flashes. Bearing 045. Multiple large caliber." That was it. The decision was made for him. Burnett didn't hesitate. His signal to the Jamaica was terse and historic. Engage the enemy. The two cruisers, sleek and powerful but still outgunned by the Lützow, turned hard and increased to full battle speed. Their bows crashed through the Arctic swells, throwing sheets of freezing spray over their decks. Inside the turrets, men loaded 6-inch shells. The range closed with agonizing slowness. Would they be in time? On the Lützow, the gun officer's hand was in the air, ready to drop it and give the final fire command. The word Führer was on his lips. And then, from the southwest, from the direction of the convoy's escape route, new shapes emerged from the haze. Not the blocky outlines of merchantmen, the sharp, predatory prows of warships. British warships. The lookouts on the Lützow shouted in confusion and alarm. For the German commander, it was a moment of utter cognitive shock. Where did they come from? This was impossible. Intelligence reported no heavy escorts. The entire mental picture of the battle, so clear a moment ago, shattered. Were these more destroyers? Or were they cruisers? The sleek silhouettes were hard to identify in the poor light, but they were coming on fast, and they were not running. Before the Lützow's captain could fully process this new threat, the leading British ship, HMS Sheffield, opened fire. 6-inch shells, smaller than his own but fired with rapid, deadly accuracy, screamed across the water. The first salvo was short, sending up tall fountains of water just ahead of the Lützow's bow. The second was long. They were straddling him. A third salvo was on its way. And in that moment, the psychology of the battle inverted completely. The hunter, poised for the kill, suddenly found itself under attack, its attention violently wrenched away from the defenseless convoy. The instinct for self-preservation is primal, even in a warship. The imminent threat to his own vessel forced the German captain's hand. The order to fire on the merchant ships died in his throat. Instead, he roared, "Shift target. Engage the new contacts." Hard to starboard. The great turrets of the Lützow, which had been aimed at the convoy, began to whir and grind, swinging towards the approaching British cruisers. The reprieve for the merchantmen was measured in seconds, but it was enough. Simultaneously, on the other side of the chaotic battlefield, the Admiral Hipper was experiencing its own shock. Having finally managed to land a crippling blow on the stubborn HMS Achates, and believing it had cowed the other destroyers, the Hipper was attempting to re-enter the fray. But as it emerged from the smoke, it was met not by the fleeing convoy, but by a salvo of 6-inch shells from HMS Jamaica. One of these shells struck the Hipper's starboard side, amidships. It was not a catastrophic hit for a heavy cruiser, but it was a profound psychological blow. For the German admiral, it was the final, terrifying confirmation. The British had brought cruisers to the fight. The trap, he now believed, was his. He imagined submarines in the water, more cruisers over the horizon. The fear of another Bismarck-style disaster, of losing a capital ship in a pointless brawl, gripped his command. The aggressive, confident, offensive spirit of the Kriegsmarine evaporated, replaced by a single, overriding imperative: save the ships. The signal flags fluttered up the Hipper's halyard. The order was given to all German forces. It was not press the attack. It was not destroy the convoy. The order was break off. Disengage. The mighty German task force, the pride of Hitler's surface navy, turned away. They fired parting shots. They laid smoke of their own, but they were turning their backs on their objective. They were running from the 2 light cruisers and the handful of shattered, bloodied destroyers who had refused to yield. On the bridge of the burning, sinking HMS Achates, a young signalman, his clothes frozen stiff, watched through binoculars as the menacing shapes of the Hipper and then the Lützow began to fade into the gray mist, heading west. He couldn't believe it. He turned to his wounded captain, his voice a whisper choked with ice and emotion. "Sir, they're leaving. The bastards are actually leaving." The gray gloom of the Barents Sea was now streaked with the black smoke of retreat and the red glow of dying fires. As the last German warship vanished into the Arctic murk, an eerie, deafening silence settled over the battlefield, broken only by the groan of metal, the crackle of flames, and the cries of the wounded. The sea was a churned, oily mess of debris and ice. On the bridge of HMS Onslow, Captain Robert Sherbrooke, his face a frozen mask of blood, finally allowed himself to be led below. His job was done. He had held the line. As he descended, the reports began to filter in, each one a small miracle against the overwhelming odds. The destroyer HMS Achates, the brave little ship that had laid smoke until her last breath, was gone. She had slipped beneath the freezing waves, taking 113 of her crew with her. But her sacrifice was not in vain. The smoke screen she maintained with her dying moments had been the literal fog of war that shielded the convoy. Survivors clung to rafts in water so cold it burned, praying for rescue. The other destroyers, Onslow, Obedient, and Orwell, were battered and scarred, their decks littered with shrapnel and stained with the blood of their men, but they were afloat. And then, the most critical report of all, a signal from the convoy commodore. All 14 merchant ships were present and accounted for. Not a single one was lost. They had weathered the storm of German steel. Their precious cargo of tanks, fighters, rubber, and fuel was still intact, still steaming towards Murmansk. The 2 light cruisers, Sheffield and Jamaica, stood guard like watchful shepherds, their crews exhausted but triumphant. They had arrived in the absolute nick of time, a dramatic, cinematic entrance that turned the tide. The German force, convinced they had stumbled into a full-blown Royal Navy trap, had fled. The Battle of the Barents Sea was over. By any tactical measure, it was a stunning, almost unbelievable Allied victory. A handful of destroyers and 2 light cruisers had faced down the most powerful surface strike force Germany could muster in the Arctic and sent them running with their tails between their legs. They had protected every single merchant ship, but the true impact of this battle was not measured in tonnage saved or shells fired. Its real shockwaves were about to ripple across the North Sea and crash down in the most powerful office in Nazi Germany, the Führer Hauptquartier, the Wolf's Lair. When the initial, confused reports from Admiral Hipper reached Berlin, they spoke of strong enemy cruiser forces, of determined destroyer attacks, and of a necessary tactical withdrawal to preserve the fleet. But as the days passed and British broadcasts triumphantly announced the safe arrival of the convoy and glorified the defense, the truth became horrifyingly clear to Adolf Hitler. He was presented with the humiliating facts. His mighty pocket battleship, the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, and 6 modern destroyers had been thwarted, defeated, by a force of older, smaller British ships. The convoy had escaped entirely. The pride of his surface navy had been made to look incompetent, cowardly even. In Hitler's mind, built on notions of willpower, racial superiority, and relentless aggression, this was unforgivable. It was not just a setback, it was an insult. A few weeks later, in a fateful conference on January 6, 1943, Hitler's fury exploded. In a room filled with his top naval commanders, including Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, he unleashed a tirade of epic proportions. He condemned the entire surface fleet as useless, a waste of precious steel and manpower. He screamed that his admirals were incompetent, that the ships were brainless. He pointed to the Barents Sea debacle as the final, irrefutable proof. In his rage, he made a monumental, strategic decision. He declared that every major surface ship, the battleships, the cruisers, was to be decommissioned immediately. They were to be stripped of their guns and armor and scrapped. Their crews would be sent to the infantry on the Eastern Front or to man the U-boats. The era of the German surface raider was over, by the direct order of the Führer. The senior naval staff was stunned. Raeder, humiliated and seeing his life's work destroyed, offered his resignation. Hitler accepted it on the spot. Raeder was replaced by Karl Donitz, the master of the U-boat war, the Wolf Pack commander. This was the ultimate consequence of the Barents Sea. Hitler, in his blind rage over a tactical defeat, had made a catastrophic strategic blunder. He had voluntarily scuttled his own surface fleet. While the order to scrap every ship was later modified, the Tirpitz, Scharnhorst, and others remained, but were sidelined to Norwegian fjords as a fleet in being. The directive was clear: no more major surface operations. All resources and all faith were now poured into the U-boat campaign. For the Allies, this was a gift beyond measure. The Royal Navy could now breathe easier. The constant, gnawing threat of a powerful German surface group breaking out into the Atlantic convoy routes was drastically diminished. The home fleet could focus on containing the few remaining German giants in their northern lairs, which they did with relentless air and submarine attacks, eventually sinking the Scharnhorst and the mighty Tirpitz. The Battle of the Atlantic, the struggle for the lifelines of Britain, shifted. The focus became almost entirely anti-submarine warfare. The courage of Sherbrooke and his men had not just saved Convoy JW 51B. They had unwittingly forced Hitler to disarm a key part of his own navy. Back in Britain, the heroes were celebrated. Captain Robert Sherbrooke, blinded in one eye and horribly wounded, was awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest award for valor. The citation spoke of his dauntless courage, outstanding skill, and determination. He had become a national symbol of defiance. The crew of the Achates was honored. The story of the battle that drove Hitler into a rage became potent propaganda, a shining example of how pluck and daring could overcome brute strength. But beyond the medals and the headlines, the legacy of the Barents Sea is etched in a colder, simpler truth. It is a testament to the power of the human spirit in the face of impossible odds. It is about a commander who chose to charge, not flee. It is about the crew of a sinking destroyer who kept making smoke to save others, even as their own ship died beneath them. It is about the merchant sailors who steamed on through the shellfire, delivering their cargo. In the vast, impersonal calculus of World War II, where numbers and industrial output often decided fate, this battle was decided by something no intelligence report could predict: raw, unyielding courage. So when you look at the cold, dark waters of the Arctic on a map, remember that in December of 1942, they were not just empty space. They were an arena where a few hundred men, freezing and terrified but utterly resolved, changed the course of a war. They proved that even the smallest ship, in the hands of the brave, can make the mightiest fleet turn and run. They didn't just win a battle. They broke a navy, and in doing so, they helped to break the back of the Third Reich.